I was curious your thoughts on this. Omnipotus. That means all powerful or all of the presidents of the United States?
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Splash Page. I'm Sean, and as always, I'm here with Andrew. And you gotta be honest, Season 2, Episode 5 of Invincible starts with an absolute bang. And I assumed there would be a little bit of pandering and a little bit of wandering around trying to figure out, or start really, the next half of this season. This episode was awesome. This episode was so incredibly intense.
Yeah, it was great. I didn't have that feeling, but only because they have so few episodes left and they really pack a lot into each of these.
Yeah. And the preview gave us a good idea of what was going to happen during this episode. And really, it's only a few issues of the comic, but it's jam-packed with big, totally story-altering storylines. So we start on Thraxa, where Mark is recovering from the Viltrumite attack. And one of my favorite things in the world is Mark's found by two Thraxans, and they're like, oh, there's a hole in him. And they just basically put gauze around him and then make him like limp back to society. Like they're in this futuristic world. They couldn't think of a stretcher.
They didn't know what blood was. Give them a break.
Well, they knew what blood was. They didn't know blood was red for humans.
Honestly, these guys live, 6 months? They might not live long enough to get that injured, generally.
Very true. Very true.
I do like that Nolan found the perfect planet for himself because they don't hang on to stuff from the past. They don't blame people for stuff that they've done because they live so short.
Right. And Nolan's, background is filled with regret and terrible things. So that pretty much lines up perfectly with what he kind of needed.
Yeah.
But we don't spend too much time on Thraxa. Quick conversation, and essentially they're like, take your half-brother with you and go back to Earth. But we find out when we're back on Earth that was 2 months.
Yeah, well, it took a long time to get back. We also find out that while he was up there, the stuff was still happening on Earth, right? We have one of my favorite one-off characters. I think he was a one-off, maybe a 1.5 off. Omnipotus from, that was issue 27.
He does come back later, but very briefly.
Yeah. So, in the comics at least, he feeds off the energies of the hero and can reshape worlds in his image. And this is when Black Samson actually wakes up in the comic books and shows up as a surprise to finish out the fight. I was curious your thoughts on this. Omnipotus. That means all powerful or all of the presidents of the United States?
I'm going to go with all powerful, but
right.
That's just me.
I'll take the other side just to keep the bet fair. We'll see how this goes.
Yeah. And then, I don't know if you realized this or thought this as well, or if you're even familiar with One Punch Man, I think his name is.
Yeah.
But there's a character that looks a lot like him that's also fighting Omnipotus. So we see that fight go on a little bit, but then we kind of get to the bigger storylines that are happening in the episode itself.
Yeah.
Mark getting back and kind of finding out what's happened over the last 2 months. He, talks to his mother, talks to William, talks to Amber, and then obviously Cecil's pretty pissed at him. What were your thoughts on how he handled coming back?
Well, this show, as much as it is a superhero show, does really dive into the minutia of day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. And Mark and his mother's relationship with what Omni-Man, with what Nolan has done, they've spent a lot of time with just the feelings of regret and the feelings of it was my fault and the PTSD of having a father that has done so much bad stuff. I think they did a really good job with that, and they really stuck to that too. Especially Cecil this episode, you could see him kind of eating crow a little bit and trying to be a little more remorseful when dealing with Mark, going, listen, I need these, but I understand that you're a person, you feel bad about me, I feel bad about you. There really is a lot of cool, small, interpersonal relationship stuff in there.
Yeah, and I wonder how people are now feeling about Amber. Amber is now, the comic book Amber and the show Amber have delineated or divided pretty massively at this point. And there was so much hate for her in the first season on how unrealistic she was, how unreasonable she was. And now she's kind of flipped tail and is being very reasonable and completely understanding. And, we find out that her grandfather passed away while Mark was away and didn't even really blame him for that. And so this is the first person we're going to say. I'm going to do is say, let's take a sip for Amber's grandfather. Cheers, Amber's grandfather.
Yeah, she did have a line where she said, "This is what I signed up for." When he
Right.
said he was gone for so long, which is the exact opposite of last year. And you
Yep.
could read it as poor writing and like she completely flipped character. I kind of read it as she grew up. Like she was a high school kid. Now she's lost her grandfather. She realized she doesn't know everything about everything. She failed that sociology exam. She's kind of
Right.
getting more grounded as she's getting into her, I guess, still later teens. Like she's still in college, early, like I guess 21 is when you graduate. So what is she, 19? Maybe?
Something like that.
Yeah. So like she's getting a little more grounded and a little more worldly and a little more kind of like the Amber from the comics, which is weird to say that Amber was grounded or worldly.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple other things I noticed. The title card now is breaking apart more and more, and we're starting to see that the background is the blue, and Invincible, rather than being in yellow like it was in the first season, is black. And maybe I'm the last one to catch this, but it reminds me a lot of something that happened in the comic around issue 51, where Mark changes his costume from the iconic light blue, yellow, and black to blue and black only. So I wonder if this title card is kind of showing us that change as well.
While we're still talking to people he met at home, William was doing a little studying, right?
Yeah, and do you notice the book that he was looking at?
I did. I have a quote from that book. If you'll allow me, yeah. A man free to kill gophers at will. To kill, you must know your enemy. And in this case, my enemy is a varmint. And a varmint will never quit. Ever.
Yeah, I love that they threw this in there. And it was one of those things where the cartoon has kind of done a average job at sneaking things in the background.
Right.
And it seems like anytime they actually take the effort to write something or draw something specific, it's worth paying attention to. And this one here was Carl Spackler, I believe I pronounced that right, who was the groundskeeper in Caddyshack, played by Bill Murray.
Yeah, who on his deathbed received from the Dalai Lama total consciousness.
Yep.
That's the name of the book, Total Consciousness by Dr. Spackler. You know, everything else they've alluded to thus far has been in-universe stuff from the comic books. This is the first time I've noticed really anything from outside of the books, but that was that was very cool.
One thing I want to mention before we move on is that Debbie really kind of takes to having this new son better than I think most people would or you'd expect them to. In the comics, it's very similar. But, you know, she's kind of like, well, your father makes a mess of things and then drops it on other people and expects them to care for it. But she does agree with Mark where it's like, Mark, you shouldn't drop out of school and we shouldn't give this baby to Cecil because who knows what he's going to do to it. And then there's that nice moment of the baby playing with the baseball mitt and the baseball bat, which is kind of a callback to the first episode of the series, where Mark and Nolan were playing baseball, kind of talking, and you also saw that one of the moments where Nolan kind of became more human was at Mark's baseball game when he was a little kid.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
Great. Now let's jump over to, just where this episode gets absolutely wild.
Well, hang on a second. Before we do that, we got to talk about Donald, right? Donald has finally taken a stance for himself with Cecil and said, "What the hell is going on? I'm obviously a cyborg." It's interesting that one, Cecil still tried to gaslight him, and two, Donald became like a human being, a full character, the moment he realized he was no longer a human being.
Yeah, that's great that you say that because the whole first season he was as robotic as it gets.
Yeah,
basically like one lines and walking around, and now that he's actually mostly robot, he does his most human thing.
Yeah,
so far in the series.
I hadn't known. I guess did they even mention it in the books? I thought he had been a cyborg this whole time. This is the first I'm hearing that they made him a cyborg. I mean, they could have changed it from the books.
Yeah, I don't remember either. Donald just didn't strike me as someone to dive too deep into, but he's certainly more interesting in the show than I remember him being in the comic.
He was very much like Darkwing. He was there a lot more than not Darkwing, Damien Darkblood. He was there a lot more than Darkblood, but he really didn't have much there.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah. Anyway, back to the craziness.
Yeah, so we have Shapesmith, who is a Martian, training with the rest of the Guardians of the Globe when they get an alert that there's a giant Martian warship headed toward Earth.
Yeah.
And it's just hilarious because there was that brief moment beforehand where he kind of turned into a Martian and Black Samson saw it, but like we knew it the whole time, and he's acted so strange that it is nice that they were like, yeah, man, we all know you're a Martian. Like, you weren't fooling anybody.
That also speaks a lot to the communication of the Guardians of the Globe, where I thought I was the only one that knew that. None of us ever talked about this. What is going on here?
And,
we not have a manager.
Yeah. And Shapesmith very quickly is like, oh, this is probably what happened because I got off the planet by pretty brutally attacking Russ Livingston and leaving him for dead. And the sequids are obviously coming here to take over the world. So Shapesmith says that it's the sequids that are coming. And the Guardians of the Globe now understand what they're up against. They divide the team into people who can be affected or taken over by the sequids, and people who can't.
So they had Rudy there, the immortal. Adam Eve shows up, Shapesmith, Black Samson, Bulletproof, and Monster Girl. And, of course, Invincible.
Yep. So they go to the ship to take on the sequids. And it's kind of awesome that both Mark and Adam Eve go. And to get them to go, I mean, one of the most unlikely of heroes in Rexplode kind of talks to Adam Eve and is like, listen, everyone screws up. You're a superhero. You have these powers. We do the best we can. But, you know, every once in a while we screw up. And
yeah, Shakespeare said that.
Yeah,
honestly, in that moment, you could see, I know it never comes up, you could see how Rex and Eve were a couple.
Yeah.
Like they actually had chemistry in that moment.
Mm-hmm. And then, you know, once they get on that ship, they start to fight the sequids and make some mistakes. But the crux of it is Adam Eve is able to hold them all off by having this protective layer, and they're all attacking it. And she can't hold it forever as Rudy is out of his robot costume, which is just like insane. Like, you never leave the robot piece. Trying to build something that will stop all the sequids, and Adam Eve can't hold it anymore.
Yeah, that I do love the Shapesmith, that whole character of he's not human, and it's really well done. Of he doesn't understand why the things he's saying are dumb and late. You know, they say, "Oh, we'll slow down and pretend to be debris," and he goes, "Great idea, except that won't work because they'll see us, and they've got really good." They're like, "Why are you telling us this now?" And it's like, "Yeah, I am telling you this now." Also, they'll definitely shoot missiles at us. See, like those missiles that are, those are the missiles I was just telling you about. And they're like, what? Why did you tell us this before? Because he doesn't think it's really a brilliant kind of characterization. I love it.
Yeah, it's great. And Ben Schwartzman is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
I'm like rewatching Parks and Rec, and just every time John Ralphio's on screen, I'm like, this is the best. So that leaves us on a big cliffhanger. What's going to happen to the Guardians of the Globe that are on the sequid ship?
Yeah.
The other big part of this story is everyone thought they were going to have the weekend off, ordering pizza and garlic nuts.
Yeah. 2 orders.
Yeah, 2 orders. And the Lizard League is trying to steal a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, that was, I think that was also issue 39. Both of these storylines were issue 39 of the book. That was an interesting plan, too, by a group of guys dressed as lizards. They said, we're not even going to do anything. We're just going to break in here, lock ourselves in, let the government know, and then they'll just do what we want them to do because we're locked in here.
Yeah, and you know what? The kind of depleted Guardians of the Globe show up to fight them, and one would imagine that they have enough strength and enough, training to take on the Lizard League, but we find out that that's not the case. So we have Rexplode, who kind of plays the leader of the group. We have Duplicate, we have Shrink Ray, and is that it?
And more duplicates, and more duplicates. That's all we got.
Yeah, so it's a real small squad. It's the weekend squad, and they take on the Lizard League. And you know what? It's just a brutal, bloody fight. We got one of these in the last episode where the Viltrumites fought Mark and Nolan, and you're like, oh, how many of these are we gonna get a season? We might be getting one every episode for the rest of the year. We're gonna have to do a separate video just breaking down the brutalness of this fight.
Yeah, this show does a good job of putting two storylines together, like the Martian stuff and the Lizard League stuff were intercut with each other the entire time. It's not like we're watching a fight. We're always watching like two fights at once cut back and forth to each other.
Yeah, it's true. And during this fight, we lose a number of people. I mean, we lose more duplicates than you could possibly count. But the sad thing is she doesn't replicate herself before the two get smashed together. And for right now, it certainly looks like we have to take a sip for poor duplicate.
What, one for each?
You might have to get some more beer if you're gonna do that. Next, we see Shrinking Ray do what everyone wanted Ant-Man to do to Thanos, where she shrunk down and she went inside of Salamander through his eye and basically ripped his brain apart and popped out his eye.
Yeah.
So, gonna give a quick sip to Salamander. You know?
Sure, you got it.
Then Shrinking Ray sees duplicates, dead bodies, and says, I'm going to do the same thing to Komodo Dragon. But Komodo Dragon catches her. And I think in the comics he just bites her in half.
No, in the comics he ate her as well.
He does eat her, okay.
There was no discussion, because I was even writing in my notes when I was reading that. Why didn't she just become big inside of him?
Okay.
And then here she did, and we saw what happened there.
Oh, and it was gross.
Yeah.
It was gross. And he kind of like burped a bubble at the end of it. But yeah, we're going to pour one out for poor Shrinking Ray.
Yeah.
And by that I mean take a sip.
Which I guess makes sense with a lizard, kind of like a snake. I know they're not the same thing, but you could eat something larger than yourself.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I didn't even put that together. That's a good call.
Neither did I till this very second, because the whole time I was like, how did he keep her down?
Yeah, Komodo dragons swallow like deer. So it makes sense.
There you go.
And then Rexplode obviously freaks out, goes to fight Komodo Dragon, and Komodo Dragon bites off his hand. Swallows his hand up, but
his hand had a power charged nickel in it. Whatever he was
and holding. Kaboom. And so pour one out or take a sip for our guy Komodo Dragon. Now Rexplode is running all over the place, trying to get his way out. An iguana attacks him. And I just love the fact that he just like cuts her in half.
Yeah.
Just like
that's right.
Splits her clean in half. So we're gonna take a sip for our friend.
This is a fun bit.
Iguana. And then, finally, we end up with Rexplode completely exhausted, and a gun goes to his back of his head, and the Lizard King is holding it.
Yeah. Is it the brave man who survives, or the one who waits till his opponent is too tired to keep fighting?
Yeah, it's like that's not really a question. I think it's the first one.
I think Marcus Aurelius said that.
There it is. I mean, great episode. We lost a few characters that we really care for, and
can we just give it up for Sean right now for remembering all the names of the different lizard people? Because there's no way I would have been able to keep any of them straight.
Lizard Guy 1, Lizard Guy 2, Lizard Girl 1.
That's how I would have written the script if I was in the room there.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, which one is this? I'm like, I don't know. It's one of the lizard people.
Yeah. And then it goes to the credits, and we get a little post-credit scene, which I love when they do, and I love that they play so fast and loose with like credits and title cards and all that stuff. And we see Alan the Alien just absolutely bulked up, like cake season it is. And he talks to Thaddeus, and like the worst held secret of all time, he just takes his beard off and he is a Viltrumite, which I mean, maybe as a show watcher only, people didn't put together, but it's painfully obvious. And the idea is that he took him off of life support to make his body kind of fight harder to survive and therefore make him stronger.
I will say the thing I do love the most about this, because this book does a good job, like the original comic does a good job of kind of grounding a superhero world in reality.
Mm-hmm.
But the one really stupid thing that I love and just works is that the only thing you need to know that someone's a Viltrumite is if they pull their beard off and they're clean shaven except for a mustache.
Exactly. I almost shaved before this meeting just to have the mustache and be like, I am a Viltrumite.
Like, wait a minute, I am too. And he's like, you're a Viltrumite? Like, you could have just had a fake beard on.
Well, thanks everyone for watching. Please like and subscribe if you're, into Invincible or just enjoy watching us talk and take sips of beer. And we appreciate it.
Check the comments down below. We have some links to Etsy pages. You can buy a t-shirt, buy some stuff. Help us out. All right.
Well, that's it from us. I'm Sean. That's Andrew. Take it easy, YouTube.
Later.